HaShanah Tova, everyone. I'd like to tell you a story that takes place way back in the middle of August of this year, about a month ago. As Lauren and I sat in the waiting room for her OBGYN, we were excited and nervous. We had known for a while that Lauren was pregnant. At the time, that was all that we knew. The ultrasound tech named Gwenna called us back to her room. She dimmed the lights and turned on a big screen TV so we could see what was happening. There wasn't much that I understood from the screen. Lauren probably did, but she wasn't sharing anything with me. And we waited patiently for information. The tech looked at us smiling and said, "Is this your first ultrasound during this pregnancy?" "Yes," we both said. I kind of looked quizzically at Lauren. Gwenna looked at the screen again. She said, "So, do you have twins in either of your family?" She asked that smiling, and my immediate reaction was, "What?" And then some words I can't say on the bima. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. "No, there are no twins in our families," we said. Lauren and I immediately freaked out as Gwenna went on to show us that there were two healthy little heartbeats. "Well, now you do," she said. "Now you have some twins in your family." As she explained the different types of twins and the safest way to have them and all this kind of stuff, I wasn't really listening. I was in a little bit of a fog. The word twins just kept playing over and over and over again in my mind. I looked over at Lauren and noticed that we both had tears in our eyes, but we couldn't tell if they were tears of joy or sheer terror. We didn't know. Just then, the nurse for Lauren's doctor came into the room. She had gotten word to give us hugs and high fives, and then the doctor came in. It was a real big party for everybody else. By the time we left the ultrasound room, the entire office knew that we were pregnant with twins, and it was like a ticker tape parade in that place, while I was basically a zombie walking through the building. We got into the car, and I said to Lauren, "What just happened in there?" "We will, God willing," she said, "have two babies in March." And I wanted to know if I was awake, and she said, "I hope so, because you're driving." A few days later, the pregnancy was going very well, but in a sad turn for our world, it felt like perhaps the world around us was starting to crumble. That was the weekend of the Unite the Right March in Charlottesville, the weekend that changed so much for so many of us. As the days passed, we read reports and saw videos that shocked us. Neo-Nazis and white supremacists marching, carrying torches, tiki torches, and chanting, "Jews will not replace us." A local church was having a gathering of many people on Friday night, and outside their doors they heard men chanting an old Nazi phrase, "Blood and soil, blood and soil." We heard from the president of Congregation Beth Israel, a Reformed temple near downtown, that congregants had to quietly exit the building using the rear exit on Saturday morning as they feared for their safety. And the leadership removed the Torah scrolls from their building as they were worried about arson overnight. This is 2017 we're talking about. Just like that, hate was unmasked. Racist, anti-Semitic, disgusting rhetoric that many of us forgot existed, or at least we tried to forget existed, came screaming to the forefront of our consciousness. All of a sudden, I felt a little uneasy about wearing my kippah in public, my yarmulke. We hired extra security here at the temple. We met with community members. One evening, about a week later, I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone who is a rabbi on the West Coast. She asked me, "Is it scary for you guys to be bringing two new lives into this broken world?" I thought about it for a little while. I didn't answer very well, but what I wish I would have said is that, yes, it is definitely scary, but it's also hopeful. These two precious little munchkins will come into a world that feels so broken in so many ways, but perhaps they are also our hope for fixing it. Hope. It is what has sustained our people for millennia throughout our dark history as Jews. It seems to be in our DNA. Rabbi Leor Frankel teaches that another rabbi named Jonathan Sachs goes even further, asserting that, in a sense, Jews invented hope. For the ancient Greeks, everything was fate, future predetermined by the past. But Jews believe in freedom, rejecting determinism in favor of human agency. Rabbi Sachs powerfully puts it, the Greeks gave the world the concept of tragedy. Jews gave the world the idea of hope. To be a Jew, he teaches, is to be an agent of hope in a world that is serially threatened by despair. Every ritual, every mitzvah, every syllable of the Jewish story, every element of Jewish law is a protest against escapism, of resignation, or the blind acceptance of fate. There's a powerful story that a British rabbi told about his time as a boy in Auschwitz. One winter evening in the barrack, this rabbi named Grin, who was just a child at the time, had a father with him, and his father drew him into a quiet corner, explaining that it was the first night of Hanukkah. He watched in amazement as his father plucked a few threads from his prison uniform and made a wick out of it and lit them in the day's now melted butter ration. The boy became very angry. How could they waste this precious food for a makeshift menorah? His father replied, "My dear son, you and I have seen that it's possible to live for a very long time without food. But Hugo, a person cannot live even a day without hope." So how can we do this? How can we begin to build hope for ourselves when we're living in such a broken world? How can we find hope when we ourselves may feel so broken? How can we move ourselves to a place where we can begin the process? First, our tradition teaches that a change in perspective, a simple shift in our worldview, can enable us to begin to build hope. One of my very favorite stories in the Torah is from the book of Numbers. The Israelites have been wandering in the wilderness for almost 40 years. They are complaining and complaining and complaining, as you can imagine. Moses wants a better lay of the land, so he gathers 12 people, 12 spies, to go and scout out the land of Israel. They're almost there, but before they just go charging in, he wanted to check it out. Very mission impossible of him. So the 12 spies sneak into the land of Israel, and they scout it out. 10 of the spies come back with a negative report. They say, yes, it's true that it's a land flowing with milk and honey. Its fields are so plentiful that it took 2 of us to bear one giant cluster of grapes. But it is also swarming with giants, they said, and the cities are very fortified. We could never defeat them. Moses, they say, this is a no-go. Let's just camp out in the wilderness for a while longer. 2 of the spies, though, Joshua and Caleb, are hopeful and optimistic about their chances in the land of Israel. They say, let us by all means go up. We shall gain possession of the land of Israel. We can do it, for we shall surely overcome it. We can do this. We have the power to make this change. They say, Ki yachol nuchal la. We can surely do this. All 12 spies were seeing the same information. They all had the same data. They just processed it differently, and they had these different perspectives. Arguably the most famous author on this subject is a professor named Tal Ben-Shahar, who is an Israeli-born psychologist based in Harvard. In his book that's called Choose the Life You Want, he discusses a time when he was feeling totally burned out himself. He had been on a speaking tour for months and months, and he sat down in his hotel room the night before a 3-day seminar, and he thought to himself, I cannot imagine how I'm going to get through these next few days. He was tired and felt trapped, that he had no choice in the matter. Then, as he was falling asleep, it finally occurred to him that, no, it's not true I just have to suffer through the next days. I have a choice. He writes in his book, the moment that I realized that to a great extent, how I would experience the next 3 days were up to me, everything changed. I could choose the path of simply suffering, or I could choose an alternate path. One where I would draw energy from enthusiastic participants, engaging in material that I believe in passionately, and reconnecting to my personal mission. Once I made a choice, I changed my focus. And by changing my focus, I changed my feelings, he writes. A few moments earlier I had felt trapped, but now I actually was excited about the next few days. He says he went on to deliver one of the most passionate performances of his life. Later he reflected, as soon as I realized what my options were, I made my decision in a split second. But getting to the point where I realized I had options was significantly more difficult. In other words, the choice was made possible and obvious only as soon as I became mindful of the fact that I actually had a choice. We are used to thinking of making the decisions as the difficult part. But the truth is that often the more difficult thing is realizing that there's a decision to be made, that we have a choice. In fact, every moment of our lives, we have a choice. Each small decision we make adds to the cumulative effect of how we live our lives. We've all been there. We know that if we're in a bad mood, that we could sulk and milk that, and then perhaps the entire day is bad. Someone who decides to focus on the positive can create, however, a positive chain reaction throughout her day. That triggers other positive experiences at work and at home. Ben Shahar says that daily rituals to practice positivity can become our default mode of thinking. There's an interesting story about a psychology professor who held up a glass half full of water in front of her class. "How heavy is this glass of water I'm holding?" she asked them. Students shouted out answers everywhere ranging from 8 ounces to a couple of pounds. She replied, "From my perspective, the absolute weight of this glass doesn't matter. It all depends on how long I hold on to it. If I hold the glass for a minute or two, sure, it's fairly light. If I hold it for an hour or two straight, the weight might make my arm ache a little. And if I hold it for a day straight, my arm will likely cramp up and feel completely numb and paralyzed, forcing me to drop the glass on the floor. The weight of the glass doesn't change in any of these cases, but the longer I hold on to it, the heavier it feels." In other words, the more time we spend idly concerned about the problems in our world and ourselves without doing anything about them, the heavier those problems become. But if we can put the glass down, focus on the positive aspects of our life, perhaps we can begin to reach towards hope. Along with a change of perspective, perhaps in the new year, we can spend less time focusing on what's wrong with our world and spend more time fixing it, more time focusing on something that's bigger than ourselves. I still remember one of the first pastoral counseling conversations I had ever conducted way back when I was a rabbinic intern at Temple Sholem in Cincinnati. My senior rabbi was away, and a congregant who I knew pretty well wanted to come in and chat. Of course, I was terrified. It wasn't until he started talking that I realized that we were even having a pastoral kind of conversation. I remember quickly trying to mentally review my notes from pastoral education classes, trying to figure out how I could respond. The man was a recently retired general practitioner physician who, up until a few months ago, was not only in practice, but he had owned the practice that had grown considerably over the years. He was used to both practicing medicine and also being the person in charge of the company before retiring. I remember him saying that he was responsible for a staff of 60 people made up of doctors and nurses and administrators. And then he said he woke up one day and he had nothing to do. The phone didn't ring. His email slowed. Incidentally, I remember thinking to myself at the time, what could I, a 26-year-old rabbinical student, possibly offer to this accomplished man? Not a whole lot. But I learned quickly that he was really just looking for a listening ear, someone who cared. So I listened and tried to be supportive. And little did I know, the most helpful thing that I said came out unintentionally as we were walking out of my office. I mentioned to him, I said, if you're looking for something to do, we could always use a hand with our youth group program this Sunday at the Ronald McDonald House. Half jokingly, I said that because, what does a retiree want to do with a bunch of kids? The youth group often made Sunday dinners at the Ronald McDonald House in Cincinnati. To my surprise, he told me he would be there. And on that Sunday evening, this guy was amazing. I could easily see how he was successful in commanding a business and running an office. Not to mention he made my job as the only other adult there so much easier, as I can barely make mac and cheese out of a box for my kids. But that small youth group program gave him the simple reminder that he could make a difference. And he told me later that that was what was so important for him, that he could contribute something, that he could offer something that gave him a little bit of hope. No, the man did not go on to become a professional volunteer at the Ronald McDonald House or anything like that, but he did keep up his medical license, and he started volunteering later that year at a free clinic in Cincinnati. And as far as I know, he's still doing that today. It's so simple, yet something many of us forget in the chaos of our day-to-day lives. What can imbue our lives with meaning and help us find hope? Reach out a hand to somebody else. Find someone that you can guide to a better place. Find an organization that shares your values and get yourself out there and get to work. One small issue to work on. That's how it begins. It can be so empowering. We don't have to be perfect people to solve all solve all the world's issues to get out there and make a difference and to do something. All we have to do is start. We know that there is a brokenness in many of us. We've all made mistakes. We've all transgressed. We've all missed the mark. We're painfully aware of that as we start reflecting on our deeds of this past year during this service. But perhaps our brokenness could inspire us to help others rather than hold them back. The wise sages, one of the wise sages of our time, Leonard Cohen, who I think is also Nick's personal role model, your muse, said in a deep, deep voice, he once sang, "Ring the bells that can still ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in." There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And perhaps those cracks can let our light out into the world as well. When we reach out to someone in need, when we serve food at the YWCA, when we listen to a friend in crisis, when we take care of an aging parent, when we teach a child, when we fight for causes in which we believe, we are linking our daily existence to helping someone else, something bigger than ourselves. And through these acts, we can begin to build hope. We can begin to let a little bit of light in through those cracks. And God willing, let a lot of light out through those cracks as well. There's no better example of moving our perspective from brokenness to hope than looking at our country over this past month. We were shaken to our core by the white supremacists in Charlottesville. Our hearts were broken. But at the same time, if we look just past the hate, just past the terror, we see a glimmer of hope. Among the peaceful protesters, there were more than 100 clergy members from the area, representing various faith denominations, gathered on Saturday morning to demonstrate God's love of diversity and tolerance. As many of us watched the events unfold that weekend, a few camera crews caught the video of these clergy people standing together, arms linked, Jews and Christians and Muslims and even more diverse folks, marching straight into the heart of the demonstration, marching right into where the violence was. One of them was a friend of Rabbi Lynette's and mine named Rabbi Rachel Schmelkin. Rachel and her group stood up bravely and showed Charlottesville and showed the world that hate will not go unchecked in our communities. They gave us a beautiful gift of hope after so much darkness. Following the devastation in Florida and Texas and just recently in Puerto Rico, we have also been inspired with hopeful stories of heroism both in both storms and all the storms' aftermath. When a Houston woman went into labor shortly after the storm, she and her husband discovered that they were trapped in their apartment as the floodwaters rose outside. So their neighbors stepped up to help. Greg and Andrea Smith were anticipating the birth of their first child. "We had 2 miscarriages before this," Greg said, "and we've always wanted a little baby. We're very new to Houston and very new to hurricanes," Greg said, adding that they had a backup plan to go early to the hospital the next morning in case Andrea went into labor. On Saturday evening, the couple decided that they would drive to the hospital the next morning in anticipation of the birth. "I expected," he said, "that there would be 5 or 6 inches that I could drive through of water. I woke up to 3 or 4 feet. Greg said, "We soon realized that we were kind of stuck. On Sunday, the couple, along with Greg's mother, found that Andrea was indeed in labor. He and his mother began calling 911, but they couldn't get through. They couldn't get through to the Coast Guard either. They finally reached the National Guard, but were told that help would not arrive soon enough. so they realized they were going to have to deliver this baby at home. While the couple prepared for that reality, one of their neighbors sent out a plea for help on a community message board. They were in an apartment complex that was located just a couple of miles from the Texas Medical Center. So within an hour or so, doctors and nurses and EMTs who had trudged through those 3 or 4 feet of water arrived at their apartment, and they were soaking wet but there to help. But the floodwaters continued to rise, so another neighbor offered them use of their second-floor apartment as they were on the first. While the couple prepared to move upstairs, another neighbor called his father, who lives across the street, from a fire station. He waded through the floodwaters to tell the firefighters about Andrea's situation. Soon, a huge dump truck, like monster truck size, arrived outside their building. And Greg ran outside to flag down the truck. The firefighters inside said, "We are here to help you." Neighbors then formed a human chain, I think 25 of the neighbors, to get from the apartment complex to the road, formed a human chain through waist-high water to get them into the truck. We were soaked, Greg said, as we sat on top of fire hoses while the firemen drove us to the hospital. They were very careful to go slow and safe, but we made it in time. Their baby, Adriel, was born shortly after they arrived at the hospital. She was healthy but needed to be treated in the NICU, in the neonatal intensive care unit. If she were born at home, that would not have been the best place for her, he said. "I'm so glad she's in the hospital. That's why we named her Adriel," he said. "It means she belongs to God." So how do we sustain hope in our broken world? How can Lauren and I bring 2 beautiful new babies into this world with so many problems? We have to make a choice. Will we see only the hateful white supremacists, or will we see the thousands of people who gathered to banish hate? Will we see only the natural disasters that befall us, or will we see the heroes stepping in to help complete strangers because it's the right thing to do? And when we look at ourselves, will we only see our own brokenness, or will we finally have the ability to see that we can make some change? We can do some good in this world. We can change our stories. We can find hope and light within darkness. May we find that light. May we find that hope. In Torah portion Nitzavim, a high holiday Torah portion, it says, "Hachayim v'hamavet natati lefanecha, habracha v'haklala, v'charta b'chayim, leman tihyeh ata v'zarecha." I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life. Choose blessing, therefore, that you and your descendants may live. May we, in our new year, choose life, choose light, and may we choose hope in 5778. Our service